This episode is brought to you by Anytime Fitness. We may talk a whole lot about sports, but when it comes to keeping fit ourselves, there's definitely room for improvement. I hit this point early July. I was just like, I am not in good enough shape. I started trying to walk at least 15,000 steps a day or hiking or just anything to keep my legs moving. Now it's the end of 2023. I feel great. I had a physical 3 weeks ago, and the guy was like, "You're doing great. You're doing better than you were 3 years ago." I felt great. Whatever your goals are, progress is possible thanks to Anytime Fitness. Get a personalized plan and support from an expert coach anytime, anywhere. Visit anytimefitness.com to try Anytime Fitness for free. Start to train for your life. Terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. See website for details. This episode is brought to you by Read, Write, Own, Building the Next Era of the Internet, a new book from entrepreneur and startup investor Chris Dixon. If you're listening to this podcast, you know what it's like to be part of a community of fans. You value the people who play, perform, and create for everyone. Well, what if there are more ways to support them, more ways to be a fan? And what if you had even more ways to connect with the teams, artists, and other creators that you love? Even though creators make the internet valuable, how much value do they get for their work? Well, that's mostly up to a few big tech companies. Shouldn't creators get more from the platforms they make successful? More value, but also more say, more control, more ownership? Read, Write, Own explores an alternative future for the internet, one that reclaims control for creators, fans, listeners, and gamers, the people who not only use the internet, but make it useful. Read, Write, Own imagines an internet built by us for us. So order your copy of the book today or learn more at readwriteown.com.
Welcome to today's episode of Beyond the Arc. My name is Kevin O'Connor, and joining me today is the Ringer's Seerat Sohi. Seerat, how are you doing today?
I'm excited. I'm really excited. Summer League coming up. We got like the last few free agent signings that we're watching out for. Gonna be a great show today.
Let's start off there with some of those lingering free agents. There's a couple guys left that really stand out. Grant Williams, PJ Washington, both restricted free agents. Last week on Beyond the Arc, I detailed Ayo Dosunmu as one of my favorite kind of next Bruce Brown free agents. And then on unrestricted guys, Kelly Oubre, bigger name from Charlotte last year, averaged 20 points. Granted, it's a small sample. And then Christian Wood, who I've liked a long time, hasn't been in the right situation necessarily. Things didn't work out with Dallas. There are some teams that have their full mid-level exception still that could make signings. The Nets, the Hornets, the Grizzlies, the Blazers, the Wizards, and the Hawks could too. The Hawks are unlikely, though, because they'd go into the luxury tax. But those teams have their mid-level, which is $12.4 million. The Spurs still have cap space over $20 million. The Rockets, Magic, Pacers could create cap space as well, depending on how some of their other deals are configured. Let's play a little bit of like free agent matchmaker here. Of those names, Grant Williams, PJ Washington, and the others, do you have a favorite fit for the teams that either have cap space or their mid-level still available?
Yeah, well, if you ask me my favorite, you know I'm starting with Grant Williams. I'm like I'm actually like the number 2 Grant Williams fan on the Ringer, thanks to Michael Pina. I didn't think that there was a bigger fan than I was, but I want to send him to Memphis. I think he'd be a perfect fit there, especially because like we know that Brandon Clark's not going to be back for at least the first half of the season. He could fill that role. I think he's their type of guy too, but like they could also use a little bit of niceness. They need some toughness, but also with a smile. He's a great talker on defense. He fits the culture, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm going Grant Williams to Memphis.
I like that. I like that a lot. I wonder though, with Boston, everything that's going on right now, they haven't signed Jaylen Brown. I know Jared Weiss reported on The Athletic, among others, who have said the Celtics just want to handle the Grant Williams situation first. I wonder if Boston, they'll probably match the mid-level at $12.4 million, but I wonder if they're wondering if, San Antonio with their cap space could come in and offer closer to $18, $19, $20 million for Grant Williams. But with San Antonio, I don't love the fit for Grant Williams because they just drafted in the second round Sidy Cissoko. They have Jeremy Sohan, a great young rookie, and those guys kind of play that 3 to 4 position depending on if there's one other big on the floor with Victor Wembanyama. They can play next to him. Like Cissoko and Sohan are the perfect guys at the 4 when you're playing a little bit smaller and more versatile next to Wemby. So with San Antonio, I don't know if they're a real threat. I wonder if Boston just ends up matching anything that gets offered for Grant Williams, which is probably why we see Dallas go for Matisse Thybulle instead of Grant Williams.
I kind of like the San Antonio fit, honestly. I totally hear what you're saying. It's a little bit more, it's more of the same in a way, but at the same time, I think Grant Williams is obviously a lot more proven. I love his floor spacing. I also think, and we'll get into this later, but when I watch Wemby, the only thing I really worry about in terms of him getting targeted is just some of those bigger, heavier guys. So having a guy like Grant Williams on the roster to just switch on to those guys provides some insurance. And he also fits, he's a young player. And I think, I really wonder how he would do with Pop, It's like, I feel like because of how active he is, how much he talks, how many suggestions he has, I feel like Grant is kind of like an ideas man, right? Like, I wonder how that would fit with Pop. I think it could be kind of fun. But to your point, though, I was a little bit surprised that Dallas went with Matisse Thybulle, but I actually really like it as well because you mentioned guys that could be the next Bruce Brown. I think Matisse Thybulle is a great fit for that type of role. We obviously know he's an incredible defender. He can guard pretty much like any perimeter player in the NBA. He's an amazing
all-defensive
on the
guy
side.
Just 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Fell out of the rotation with Rivers. And, I feel like an offensive game that was already sputtering in Philadelphia, then when he was just like getting tugged in and out with Rivers, he was overthinking even more than ever and looked just completely lost out there. But then when he got to Portland, he's been shooting 38% from 3 ever since on way more attempts too. And he looked more free out there. So I think if he ends up in Dallas, it's a great fit because he'll be playing around Luka and Kyrie. He's going to get plenty of open shots and there's going to be plenty of space for him to cut into as well.
I think that's a great point with him being kind of like that next Bruce Brown type of guy. He can be that screener like Bruce Brown. He's a cutter. He's a smart player, great defender. And with Thybulle, I think, with Philadelphia, that element with Doc Rivers is 100% true. Doc did not trust Thybulle, and Thybulle did not have confidence playing for him at all. And I think that affected him with his performance for the Sixers. Whereas with the Blazers, like he said, he shot 38% from 3, the best he ever did. In his career, if you want to look at all the years he's been in the NBA, it's still only 33% on spot-up three-pointers. So it's not great for him in his career, but the work he's put in, maybe he can at least get to 36, 37% over a full season. And if he's at that point with Dallas, with everything else that they have after the offseason they drafted Derek Lively and Omax Prosper. They signed Seth Curry, Dante Exum, re-signed Kyrie Irving and Dwight Powell, and now they have the offer sheet into Matisse Thybulle. They're kind of building out these tough, versatile wing players with Omax Prosper. He's awesome. I loved him in college. Tough, versatile guy. Now with Thybulle, that's what you want around Luka. Lively, that lob threat, rim protector type of player. Seth Curry, the shooter, getting him back to Dallas. I think Dallas has had, a really, really strong offseason considering the tough situation that they are in with a lack of assets. I think they've taken a big step up around Luka.
Yeah, I feel like they kind of, given the fact that they were just baked into the Kyrie Irving situation, that's the one place I have a bit of a contention with, which, it is what it is. They traded for him. They didn't want to lose him. I thought the experiment was pretty much over as soon as it began, in my opinion, but they don't believe in sunk cost fallacy, I guess. So they re-signed him. I can't believe he got a player option. That is absolutely hilarious.
Which he'll probably accept at that point. Maybe not, though. Maybe he restores all his value.
I just feel like, why give Kyrie Irving options? This is like, why give him security?
That's when things go wrong.
Exactly. Like, this is a guy that, like, if they signed him to like a 1+1, I would understand that. Especially, like, as we know, there were really no other bidders for his actions, like for his contract.
Kyrie did not like our boss Bill Simmons saying that.
He didn't?
No, he responded to him on Twitter.
Oh, I didn't see that. I did not see that. Yeah, I mean, look, like they manufactured the Houston one, which as we saw with Harden, like just not a lot of truth to that. Like they just went and paid Fred VanVleet, and it seems like that was like their plan. So yeah, with Dallas, like that was the one part I look at and say like they're acting with too much desperation with that contract. I think like at the end of the day, you offer him less years, and if he truly says like, okay, I'm gonna walk, like you live with it. That's it.
I think you had to bring him back. I think with Kyrie, you're retaining the highly valuable on-court player, and you gave up so much to get him. You're banking on it working out, and if things don't work, and you're in a position where in a year or two he has far few years left on his contract that can be used as an expiring or a near expiring deal with the picks that you'll eventually get as the years go by. So I think for Dallas, you just don't. You're in with Kyrie. Like it or not, that the mistake happened in February if you don't like it. But at this point, it's like you're just in. You're in.
Honestly, like I was looking at it like if they didn't re-sign Kyrie, they would have just had a whole bunch of cap space. Like maybe you throw yourself into the VanVleet sweepstakes. Maybe you go after Draymond Green and kind of just like build your team in a completely different way and get Luka playing faster again. So I thought they had more options, but overall, like you said, they had a great offseason despite that, and they still have a traded player exception too. So
$17 million, right? So I think with that deal they made on draft night, that gives them some flexibility to get interesting. Like they could even theoretically go after a Grant Williams, a PJ Washington in a sign and trade situation with Boston or Charlotte respectively. Probably something they save over the course of the season. But with PJ Washington, talked about him last week on the Beyond the Arc, one of my favorite free agents again, just his versatility as a two-way guy. Of all these teams, Brooklyn, Charlotte, Memphis, Portland, Washington, San Antonio, I feel like PJ Washington is somebody that could fit on any team at all. And I'd love to see him go to like a post-Dame Blazers team where they kind of are a clean slate. They re-signed Jeremy Grant, and you add PJ Washington to that equation, could allow him to play some small ball 5. You can play him at the 4 with Grant. I just think suddenly the Blazers would have like a really nice foundation for Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe and Anthony Simons and, all their young guys to kind of, operate around. Because PJ Washington is a young guy. He'd be part of that future for them as well.
I love that fit. I think he's just such a great yang to all the guards that they have. He's a great defender. I think he'll probably end up going back to Charlotte if it's just going to be the mid-level. Like they have to.
They'd be silly if they
have to. But now that you said that, I kind of, and honestly, like I feel like it's kind of a bargain too. Like him at the mid-level, he's such a great player. He's so versatile. He can do so many things. So, I feel like he's just going to end up back there.
To me, he's a $20 million player. He should get that much. What do you think about, destinations for Christian Wood, Ayo Dosunmu, either of those guys?
So I feel like Christian Wood would be really good in Brooklyn. They need somebody to eat up some touches and score some points. And that was kind of the biggest problem in Dallas with him is that he wanted more touches and they just didn't really have them for him. It's a Luka-centric offense and just wasn't going to go that way. But I think with the perimeter guys that the Nets have, they're not quite as ball dominant. They're going to be much better setup men. Like they can space the floor around him. I don't love it as like a long-term fit for them by any means. Like Christian Wood is not a guy that I look at and I say like, wow, I need him on my team. I just think that the way that he seems to just want to grow out his offensive game. I think he can be a plus defender. I don't think that he has like the intelligence to be a like lockdown, be your rim protector guy, but you put him next to Nick Claxton and I'm not so worried about that anymore. And he spaces the floor too. So I think that's a good fit, but I'm also just like, there is no Christian Wood fit that I look at and I'm like, wow, this really just excites me a lot.
With Christian Wood, it's interesting because I think with him, he signs with Houston hoping to play with James Harden. Harden, blasts his way out of there and goes to Brooklyn. He goes to the Mavericks playing with Luka. It feels like a great fit on paper, and in some respects it was. He played better than he ever had. That situation was not great, though. Jason Kidd didn't trust him. They were trying to get minutes for all their other bigs, JaVale McGee, Dwight Powell. It just felt like Wood never had a consistent role. And part of that is because of the inconsistent defense that you're talking about with him. He's never been a steady lockdown guy. The effort has wavered. Offensively, though, I still think with Christian Wood, there's something there, and I want to see him.
You've been early on him
since he was in Detroit. I've really liked Christian Wood, so I think with him, I look at some of those teams and I don't like any of the fits. Part of me kind of hopes he does a massive gamble on himself and goes to a team that either has the taxpayer mid-level for lower money, or goes to a team that can even just do the minimum. A team that's in a winning situation. Like if he goes to the Heat post-Dame acquisition, where he can play the 5 next to Bam Adebayo, who's really your perimeter defender, Wood being the shot blocker, or he can go to the Lakers, play next to Anthony Davis over the course of the full regular season, and then during the playoffs, sometimes he's the backup 5. Those are the situations I'm thinking about where Christian Wood could go from, 1 year league minimum or just, tax mid-level guy to, he finally was in a situation where he could completely prove himself as a player. And that's what all you can ask for some of these guys who are left on the market at this point. Ayo Dosunmu for the Bulls, he's only entering his 3rd season. First year, he's great shooting threes. Second year, not so much. First year, he's awesome defensively. Second year was a little bit more up and down for the Bulls. But I still think with him moving forward, like he could go to any of these teams and he could get opportunities. What about with Kelly Oubre, our last guy on the list here? Is there a good fit for him?
So I know you mentioned he was a 20-point-per-game scorer. I feel like he was like a vacuum that wasn't actually ready to be a vacuum. The efficiency was so bad. He shot 32% from 3 on catch-and-shoot threes. 36% on wide open threes, so I'm not exactly even looking at it like, I'll throw him onto a team where he's not going to have to play as much of a role and he'll be good in that. Like, I feel like he has always kind of been stuck in like no man's land. He's not quite a 3-and-D role player, but he's not a strong enough shot creator to be, even your sort of guy off the bench. I feel like that's probably his best role, being a sort of 6-man guy. So I don't love him for anybody, honestly. And I grit my teeth and say Brooklyn just because they could use some wing depth. But I don't, it's like the Christian Wood thing. Maybe you're more of an optimist than I am. Maybe like can make me see things a little bit differently with Kelly. You're not a Kelly Oubre optimist? Okay, yeah, we're on the same page. Yeah, I don't
he's too inefficient. When we're back, we'll talk about Damian Lillard. Today's July 6th, which is an important day in the NBA. The moratorium ends, which means teams are officially able to make all these signings that we've been hearing about throughout this month. It's also important with Damian Lillard because Max Strus would be going to a sign and trade to the Cavaliers, Victor Oladipo in a trade to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And why that's important, great hoopshype.com writer Yossi Goslin, who does salary cap stuff. He had a series of tweets and he wrote an article about it saying how this day is important because for Miami and their hopes of getting Damian Lillard, there's a 7-team trade scenario that is eligible that would allow Portland to take on no money and create a $40+ million exception, a traded player exception. The way it would work is these unofficial deals. Miami has the unofficial deal with the OKC Thunder. They have the unofficial deal with a 3-way with the Cavs getting Strus and then the Spurs. Brooklyn has an unofficial deal with the Pistons. If you combine all those deals, the Heat could give up just Hero to the Nets, who don't have to give up any more salary, already trading Joe Harris, Oladipo, and Strus. That's enough money to take on Dame. The Nets, like I just said, don't have to give up any more money than Joe Harris to take on Tyler Hero. And at that point, it would work financially. That might be a little too crazy for you. That might be like 7-team deal.
Have we ever had a 7-team deal in NBA history?
But the biggest deal in NBA history is a 5-team, 12-player deal by Pat Riley in the Miami Heat way back in the mid-2000s when they got Antoine Walker.
So we're saying Andy Ellisberg might be able to get this done.
Maybe. So even if that's too unrealistic, too much of a pipe dream, and tomorrow it's just a normal sign and trade, Strus goes to Cleveland, Oladipo goes to OKC. The Oladipo one still has an interesting wrinkle in it where maybe it's something involving just OKC. And the reason why, again, Yossi had a tweet about this. Last year, OKC and Miami made a deal where within the deal, the Heat, they had a future first-round pick going to the Thunder that was protected from like 2023 through 2026. That pick, the protections were changed to just 2025, allowing the Heat to trade other first-round draft picks. the Thunder still have that protected 2025 first-round draft pick, which is why right now the Heat can only trade 2 future firsts. One of the hurdles in the deal for Damian Lillard. They just don't have enough. Mm-hmm. They could, in theory, instead give up their 2030 first-round draft pick unprotected to the Thunder to get back that 2025 protected pick, allowing them to instead trade 3 first-round draft picks to the Blazers instead of 2 for Damian Lillard. They could give their 24, their 26, and their 28. So there's some random crazy stuff that could happen today, allowing the Miami Heat to give more to the Blazers to get a Damian Lillard deal done. Just something to watch for. I know.
That's kind of interesting. But then I look at it, I'm like, would I rather have their 2030 pick, or would I rather have, two picks that are going to be much more recent?
Well, I mean, so for Portland, the future picks wouldn't make a difference as much. It would still be the 2028. Would you rather have the 2030, or you're saying the 24 and the 26?
Yeah.
You're saying you might rather have the 2030 instead of the 24 and the 26.
Yeah, well, considering how competitive they are right now. I mean, by 2030, maybe they're just in a different regime.
Yes,
right?
and that's like the interesting thing here for Portland. Maybe you would rather have the 2030 instead of 24 and 20. Because that 2024 is with Damian Lillard, Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler. That would be in the 25 to 30 range in all likelihood, unless something goes seriously wrong for the Heat. Whereas the 2030, here's the thing with the Heat picks. Around the league, you talk to people, the valuable picks that could be moved are like those Suns picks with all their age, the Mavs picks in the future because nobody knows where Luka's going to go when his free agency hits. They already traded one of their future picks. The Heat picks, the Heat never stink.
Yeah.
Even after they lost
when
LeBron.
They're bad. Yeah.
When they lost LeBron, they won 37 games, and granted, they still had other guys. They never really went into a full-on rebuild. They never do.
Wasn't the last really bad season they had the one year that Dwayne Wade got hurt?
Yeah,
and they got the Michael Beasley pick.
Yes.
That was 2008.
For sure, and they're not going to let that happen in a year where they don't have their own first-round draft pick. So people around the league don't think those future Heat picks are all that valuable. So maybe you would rather have the 2. But at the same time, I still think from Portland's side of things here, you wrote about that this week on The Ringer, how with Damian Lillard, he shows loyalty for years to the Blazers. And now he's in this position where he has a team that he wants to go to. He wants to go to Miami. That is his number one preference. It is his only preference. It's where he wants to play. But the Blazers have their own business to take care of as well, and they need to set up a bright future around Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe and all their young talent. Can you kind of talk me through some of the stuff you wrote about this week, what went into your mindset as you were writing? Because it was a very good article. It was great.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, I just wrote about how loyalty doesn't really earn you anything in the NBA. I think I was a little too hard on the Blazers, and maybe it took away from the overall point, which is that, like, it can earn you memories, and maybe Dame, if he looks back at his career, he would do everything the same just because of the type of guy he is, the things that he values, and that's completely fair. That's his decision. But when you look at the situation that he finds himself in now, like, it is, unless Miami really, they really pull something off, I like that 3-pick idea. It's still like, but to your point though, you're still kind of asking the question of, would you rather have those 2 picks? I think we are starting to underrate Tyler Hero a little bit. Like, we went from overrating him to now we're like, why would you want Tyler Hero back? Like, he's really good.
He's good. And maybe like Brooklyn as a third team gives up an extra first, and then it turns into 4 first-round draft picks and Jovic, and you can say you got 5 back for Dame and maybe a swap. So 5 and a swap.
Sure, throw Highsmith in there.
Yeah.
I think also, like, maybe to get this done, like, you got to put Caleb Martin in there maybe. I think that could actually just be what it maybe comes down to at the end of the day.
27 years old. You could flip him for another first come deadline time if you're Portland, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think any contender would love to have him. So there are options for Miami, but the piece was essentially just about the fact that he is in this situation now because he decided to commit to the Blazers. He has a ton of years left on his contract. He signed an extension. He basically gave up power and leverage for loyalty, for security, for stability, for money, of course.
For a lot of money.
A lot of money.
He'll be making $60+ million
A lot of money,
year.
but honestly, money that the Blazers were going to have to give him if they wanted to keep him. There wasn't really a choice there. They were going to have to pay him that much. Otherwise, he probably would have not extended then, and then we're probably having this conversation a couple of years ago. We probably should have had this conversation a couple of years ago for the good of both sides. But I've been thinking about the situation that Dame is in, and Dame is a good guy. He has a lot of character. He loves to play basketball. He's talked about how he plays for the love of the game. And one of the things that's alienated him from the modern NBA is just the fact that it doesn't seem like a lot of players are thinking about that first and foremost. And he understands the business side of it and stuff. And like he has said too, like one of the things that he loves about the NBA now is just the amount that you can, you know, build your brand and, you know, gain financially as well. Like the player power aspect of it is not lost on him, but he's a little bit more of an old school guy. But as a result of that, he finds himself in this situation. And I've been thinking about that, like kind of juxtaposing it with the James Harden situation where he is not that guy. This is his third trade request now in 3 years. And if you're Utah, for example, and you're thinking about trading for Damian Lillard, you are probably going to factor in the fact that this is a guy who will grit it out and play, even if he ends up in a situation where he doesn't want to be.
He went to college there.
That's a good point.
He goes back once a year all the time for the basketball camp at his alma mater.
Yeah, that's a good point. So maybe Utah is not like necessarily a place that he wouldn't want to play, but any franchise in the NBA can be looking at it and saying, well, he'll probably end up playing kind of in the same way that Kawhi Leonard didn't want to go to Toronto, but he ended up playing, right?
He wins a championship.
And he wins a championship. He makes the best of it, and they make the best of it, you know? James Harden, on the other hand, we have seen what he does when he doesn't get what he wants. Like we watched that Sacramento game, and like we have seen him like just come into training camp completely out of shape. So it puts a lot more pressure, I think, on Daryl Morey to make a deal, because you don't want him showing up to training camp and now we have another situation where Joel Embiid's co-star is completely checked out in training camp and looking for a trade. And if you're any other team in the league, you're not necessarily going to be making an offer for James Harden, knowing what he might do if you go and get him and he doesn't want to be there.
Whereas with Dame, it is absolute nonsense, the reporting about him being an unhappy superstar. You don't want to trade for an unhappy star. You know, all these teams aren't going to be willing to trade for him because he won't be happy. Dame, if he gets traded to another team, whether it's Utah, San Antonio, or even the team that Chris Haynes reported that he doesn't want to go to for sure, the Boston Celtics, he goes to any of those teams, it's going to happen pretty fast where those fan bases embrace him and those locker rooms embrace him and they're starting to win games and there's buy-in. And for like San Antonio, Utah, even New Orleans, those teams can do multiple big moves. If they were to get Dame for whatever it takes, they'd still have enough assets left over to make another one big move or multiple, you know, medium-sized moves to kind of bolster their roster, increase their finals chances. Would the roster be as great on paper as Miami would be entering this season? No, it would not be. But I think Dame would find joy in those situations. And look, like you said, Kawhi didn't get what he wanted. He goes to Toronto, wins a ring. Paul George didn't get what he wanted. He goes to Oklahoma City. Then he signed an extension before he ended up going to LA to join Kawhi with the Clippers. Sometimes, you know, the things that you want, you don't get. And I think for Damian Lillard, in all likelihood, Miami's the favorite. They probably will get Damian Lillard. But if San Antonio steps up, if Utah steps up, if New Orleans steps up, despite the fact Dame doesn't want to go there, if they want to gamble some of their future assets to try to win now, they can, if they want to, top Miami's offer. If you're in their front office, are you factoring in at all Dame's wishes into this equation? Or are you thinking purely about, we have Scoot Henderson, we have Shaedon Sharpe, we just re-signed Jeremy Grant. We need to think about the future here. Like, how much is Dame's past kind of informing what you're doing now?
I think it's such bad juju to have your best player in franchise history leave on a bad note. And I know that there's like no cap accounting for these types of things, but I know that Scoot Henderson is watching what's going on. I know that Shaedon Sharpe is watching what's going on. You're going to want to retain those guys, and they're going to be looking at how you treated the best player in franchise history. Maybe free agents might not be. I don't think Portland is the type of team that needs to be, watching out to see if like, Joel Embiid is
no.
yeah,
like,
it's
they've
just
never
like,
signed anybody
exactly.
and they never will. Like, it's not like nobody wants to go to, Indiana necessarily. They're still getting workouts. Nobody, doesn't want to go to San Antonio just because they didn't trade Kawhi to where he wanted to go. I just think some of that stuff, yeah, maybe Scoot and those guys look at it, but at the same time, they're like, oh, this team actually went all in to build an optimal situation around us and our futures. They're actually invested in us instead of looking backward. I mean, I think it could be viewed both ways. And I'm sure some of those guys would feel both ways.
Yeah.
Scoot would probably share those feelings simultaneously.
I'm honestly fascinated to see what this next generation of superstars is going to operate like, because I think what we've seen from the player power era is that getting to do what you want doesn't necessarily get you what you want, right? Like James Harden, 3 trade requests, 3 years. Kyrie, KD.
Yeah.
PG has ended up in the city that he wants to be in. Like they haven't figured out the championship end of it. LeBron, for the most part, it's worked out, but it's not this end all be all situation. It's just a matter of having the agency to make your own mistakes, really. Which, hey, like that's all any of us can ask for in life. Like I think you have a right to that. But at the same time, I do wonder if, a guy like, I'm really curious, like what does a guy like Tyrese Halliburton, who just, extended in Indiana, what does he make of these sort of like multiple sort of operating options that you have as a superstar? Because this is really like these guys that have been doing it this time around, they're like the new era, right? And they were almost like the guinea pigs for all of this, right? And we've seen it go in so many different directions. And yeah, I don't know. I'm really curious what like even just a guy like Scoot Henderson thinks, because we don't know ultimately, but I'm sure, they're watching,
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think part of it, kind of gets lost in the conversations. We're talking about Dame and what he wants. It's not like Hero, he removes the heat from his social media profiles. It's not like Duncan Robinson, Kyle Lowry, whoever it is with these guys have much of a say in the matter either. I like for me,
there's like 10 players in the league that really get to,
sure. It's such a limited amount. And sometimes occasionally like Bradley Beal, you luck out, you can negotiate your way into a no trade clause. Bradley Beal could end up either being the final no trade clause, considering that the Wizards had no leverage at all, or he's going to set the precedent. Like, let's say Beal goes where he wants. He goes to the Suns for, pick swaps. It wasn't a great deal necessarily for the Wizards. They got the most that they could. And then if Dame doesn't get what he wants, he goes to, say, San Antonio, Utah, whatever it might be. I wonder if that could then make these top 5 to 10 players we're talking about in the league, they may be saying, I need a no trade clause to stay here, or I will leave for somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Maybe it goes the other way where we get more no trade clauses after we see Beal get what he wants and Dame doesn't get what he wants. That's very possible as well, that could be the future. But for these teams with the new CBA and the amount of money that's out there right now for some of these players, the rising salary cap, that's what Dame's camp is kind of hoping prevents some of these other teams from, deciding, hey, we want to get Damian Lillard. He's 4 years left. He's in his mid-30s. He's 1 year removed from having abdomen surgery. They hope Miami will be the only team willing to take on his $200 million over the next 4 years because nobody wants to hit the second apron except for the Phoenix Suns. I don't know, though. I think Dame, like if I'm San Antonio,
not worried.
If I'm San Antonio, Seerat,
yeah,
I want to optimize Victor Wembanyama. And the way to optimize Victor is to give him arguably the best offensive talent in all of basketball and somebody who can be a leader and give that franchise even more of a direction and help them win now. Wemby himself said lottery night in his interview, from France with Brian Windhorst, I'm trying to win a championship ASAP. Mm-hmm. The Spurs, if they were to get Dame, if Victor Wembanyama is going to be one of the best defenders in basketball right away, he's going to be one of the best defenders. They have good wings, Devin Vassell. They could, I assume, could keep Sohan in a deal like that as well. If they traded a picks-heavy deal with Keldon Johnson and got Dame, like I said earlier, they'd still have a bunch of other assets to go out and make another move. And so for San Antonio, would they be better than Miami on paper? No. But could they be better than Miami very soon? Yes, they could be. And with the Spurs, I am just intrigued by that. I'm intrigued by all the noise around there. I'm intrigued by them still having their cap space. They're trying to do something with that, and maybe it's just being the team that gets hero. That could be the case too. But San Antonio is an interesting variable in this.
They are. They're fascinating. I actually really like them as a maxi destination too. But the one thing about Dame and San Antonio that's really interesting to me is obviously, like, we've heard all of these sort of rumblings, like Dame has the utmost respect for the organization. You could totally see that from the type of guy he is. He would fit really well.
Played with Pop, Team USA.
Yeah, absolutely. But so that podcast where he talked about Miami being one of the places that he'd love to go to because Bam is his guy, and Brooklyn because Mikhail is his guy. Brooklyn, I don't think, is a team that we talk about enough in the Dame sweepstakes. They could do kind of a similar thing. They have a ton of picks. I think they could, like, I don't know if they could pull off like a Dame and Pascal Siakam situation.
Been kind of forgotten.
They've been forgotten
in all of it. Like they were the other team Dame mentioned he'd be open to going to. Now they're not part of it, but they're probably number 2.
Yeah, and they could make a really good deal for it. But like with the Spurs, you know, that podcast that he was on, one thing that he talked about with the culture of the new NBA was that it's not necessarily the player's fault that it's this way. It's that, you know, from a very young age, they get told that they are going to be all of that. They become entitled from a young age to basically get the keys to a franchise from the moment that they get there. And he actually brought up Wembanyama and basically said that, like, everybody is saying that he is going to be the guy when he hasn't even played a basketball game yet. So that kind of makes me question whether or not Dame would necessarily be looking at Victor. I mean, obviously, I'm sure, you know, he's seen him play. We've all seen him play. Like you said, defensively, immediate impact.
Seen him
offensively.
Friday in Vegas.
Yes. Oh, man. Yeah. Happy Wemby Day to all those who celebrate.
Yes.
But I'm curious about what that fascination actually means, because this is a young team at the end of the day. The other thing that Dame said in his exit interview, I don't really have the appetite to wait around for guys who need 2 or 3 years to be ready. So I don't necessarily see him as being the type of basketball mind that looks at any rookie, even if it's the most anticipated rookie that we've had since LeBron James, and saying, oh, he's immediately going to be ready. So I just have questions about that.
I mean, there's no doubt Miami is the best fit for Damian Lillard. It's just a matter of, will Miami be able to put together the package that is the best trade for Portland? Maybe we'll find out today, July 6th. Maybe this is going to linger for another month because you can't trade Jaime Jacquez, who's been great in the California Classic. You can't trade him for 30 days because he signed his rookie deal. We'll be back talking about some of those rookies. Welcome back to Beyond the Arc here at Seerat Sohi from TheRinger.com. Seerat, Summer League in Las Vegas starts on Friday. It's been happening this past week, the California Classic, Utah Summer League. The NBA, before we get to some of the players, the NBA is experimenting with a new anti-flopping rule. They have a flopping penalty now that they're testing out where the opposing team is awarded 1 free throw. Referees are not required to stop play for the flopping violation. They can wait until there's the next neutral opportunity. They can wait till dead balls, timeouts for that free throw to recur. What are your thoughts on the NBA actually trying to crack down on flopping? Do you believe that they will actually be successful in doing this? And what does it mean for the future of Marcus Smart?
It was the right time for Boston to get off his contract. Yeah. I think they would have had gotten one less pick if this rule came before. I mean, I like it. I like that they're doing it. I think there's just way too much flopping in the league. Mm-hmm. I think it could have some really interesting consequences for a guy that we're going to talk about, Chet Holmgren, because I was watching his first summer league game, and this has been the story with him last summer league too. I think we see it with Wembanyama as well, where when you get those bigger, stockier guys on him and they get a post up, sometimes it feels like Chet's only recourse is to take a hit to the chest and fall. And I'm not even necessarily saying that he's flopping. He could actually just be falling there. And it's regardless of whether he's in good position or not, those calls, I think, are going to just look a little bit different if the NBA actually institutes this. It has implications for the Thunder in general, like the number one charge-taking team in the league, but also just modern defense as well, just like with how important rotational defense has become. You look at a team like Miami that, doesn't necessarily protect the rim in a traditional way. If they actually go ahead and we see less of this. Maybe we see less charges. We see that stuff being incentivized less. I don't know. It's going to be fascinating to see how defenses react.
Yeah, I know. I think for defenses, when it comes to flopping and like kind of you run through a screen and you act like it was a moving screen even though it wasn't. Does this just create another 50-50 call that referees don't know? Like, you just don't know. Sometimes block or charge, it's very hard to know.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be tough for officials. Part of me wonders. I would love the league to, you kind of have that guy watching from Secaucus. Like they can watch the replays during dead time and really, figure out was this a flop or not. And then you can make the call there, say, hey, during this commercial break, this was a flop, confirmed. And then, the free throw can happen while nobody's watching, during the break. Because you also don't want to break up the pace of play.
Yeah.
And you don't want to add more, dead time with someone standing at the free throw line for these, additional free throws. You want to keep the game moving. You want the game to get quicker. Baseball has become a much more enjoyable, consumable sport for a lot of people. And because of what they've done with the pitch clock and trying to increase the pace of game, the NBA, they need to be thinking, what is the most aesthetically pleasing product for people to, consume when they're at home and they have all these choices with Netflix and FanDuel TV. You can do whatever you want to do. You don't have to tune into an NBA game live.
Yeah, why would you watch basketball? We can just watch us talking about basketball, right? Like what's the
Exactly,
point?
right?
Yeah.
Why would you ever do that?
Yeah.
But I mean, ultimately, I think for the league, I hope that doesn't become a detriment to the enjoyment of the game. But for the NBA overall, though, getting flopping out is the priority because anytime I talk to casual NBA fans, people who tune in for a big game or tune in for just the finals, I ask them a lot of the time, why don't you watch over the course of the season? And one of the most popular things people say is the flopping. They say it's annoying. Players flop all the time. There's too many whistles, too many stoppages. I think the NBA needs to listen to those fans because hardcore fans, we're tuning in no matter what.
Right.
We're going to enjoy games even when there's terrible calls throughout. At the end, when it's good, we're happy and we got a smile on our face. But those casual fans are the ones that you need to turn into hardcore fans in order to continue growing the game as much as you can.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of the NBA's calculus too, because I think when they released the rules, they also mentioned that refs don't have to call those immediately. They can actually clock those, and then they can figure it out at the break. So I love the idea of incorporating Secaucus into it. They can take a much closer look at it, see if it's being faked at all, and then come back at the break, have the announcement. Sure, like this guy got a flopping call. It's embarrassing. And I think that could be a big deterrent.
Leading the league in flops.
Yeah. Like if you end up being a guy that gets called for too many flops, like I could see that being a deterrent for players.
Publicly
you just don't want to be seen.
Is that what you're suggesting?
Like I don't love public shaming, but I feel like as a society, it's become like our biggest way to deter any bad behavior. I don't necessarily want to play into that too much, but at the same time, if it could improve the product and we're already kind of stuck in this place, we might as well use it. Do the ends justify the means? I don't know.
I think a simple announcement on Twitter or Threads, whatever the app of the day may be. I think that could be enough and deterring players saying, geez, I'm leading the league in flops. This is the 12th time this year I've been penalized and gave up points.
You could call it like the Marcus Smart Award, give it to someone at the end of the year.
That would be funny. That'd be a good bit. We should do that next season.
We should,
the arc. And I think it's important. It's so important for the NBA right now to improve the game in that sense because there's so many amazing players. Like we have so many amazing players already in the league. Then you look at Summer League, and you mentioned Chet Holmgren. He's back this year. He gets hurt before last season. He didn't even get to play his rookie year. You got Chet, Victor Wembanyama, all these other great rookies, Scoot Henderson, who's so lovable on Portland. Brandon Miller, 6'9", playmaking, shot making, wing, forward player. There's like so many other good rookies. Jaime Jacquez with the Heat already impressing up and down the line in the first and second round. There's guys that their fan bases are going to fall in love with. But those big names, the Chets of the world and the Victors of the world, those are the players where I think you got to get people tuning in because they're such enjoyable players.
Man, the NBA just got to love, like they have to love the chokehold that they have over July and June at this point. Like the finals leading into the draft, into free agency, into trade season. It's just, I know that they talk about maybe they don't want all the drama and they pretend that they don't like tampering, but it's great for the NBA. And Summer League now too has just become such a huge event. Like what was your first Summer League?
I think it was maybe 2015. No, maybe it wasn't until I was with the Ringer. Maybe it was 2017. I think it might have been 2017. Okay. That was my first one, actually. So that was the Lonzo year.
That was Lonzo. Okay, yeah, so
that was my first. Yeah, that was my first one. Yes.
That was. I feel like that was kind of. That was when Summer League kind of crossed the Rubicon. It was kind of crazy that year. You had all these fans drive up from LA. It was like there was like all these huge basketball fans basically making like the summer pilgrimage to Vegas, which is a place that you put anything in Vegas. It's been like the beauty of having sports in Vegas. Like I'm from Edmonton. Every time the Oilers play there, like there's a year that it was Connor McDavid's birthday, and there were just a whole bunch of deals. Like you partner up with an airline, and you're like, okay, yeah, it's going to cost you this much and this much to get tickets and a hotel, and it's Vegas, so people are going to want to go anyway. So just the fact that Summer League is in Vegas, genius. And then these like last few years, like the amount of hype there is.
Zion year.
The
earthquake.
Oh man, that was hilarious. Yeah.
I didn't feel the earthquake that year. I was walking out of the arena to record a podcast while the Jumbotron was shaking. I didn't get to see it.
Oh, that was crazy. Everybody's like looking up at it. But like there's always something happening.
We don't get one this year.
Hopefully. I mean, there's an earthquake a couple days ago. I felt it in Los Feliz. But yeah, like the hype builds every year. Last year it was Chet. This year with Wemby, it's going to be crazier than ever. And it's just awesome for the NBA, and it feels like it's just getting bigger and bigger.
With all these, you're talking to like big names, like literally big players. Victor Wembanyama, Chet Holmgren. We just see Jokic win the title. Giannis has won. Embiid. There's all these great bigs in the league, and they all have like different styles. And with Chet and Victor, they're more similar in a way. I mean, Wemby is potentially the best defensive prospect we've ever seen. Offensively, we'll see how his game progresses over the course of time. But Chet this week and his summer league games so far, he looks like a more developed version of himself after the slow start he had in his first game. I mean, attacking closeouts, two-handed blocks at the basket. He's a bit stronger, added 13 pounds of muscle. Chet and Wemby, those two going toe-to-toe over the course of the season. I hope to see them match up multiple times, and they could be the leading candidates for Rookie of the Year, potentially.
Yeah. I mean, what a strange, amazing game this is becoming, Like, when you watch both of those guys play, I feel like they are going to shrink the geometry of the court. Like, this is the answer to the three-point revolution, essentially, right? Like, I watch Wemby block a pull-up three-pointer. It never gets old. It just never gets old. Because, like, there's always that element. He does it a lot, and there's always this element of surprise, too, where you're like, really? Like, really, he got all the way out there? And it's like, yeah. And, like, the players still are surprised, too. Like, that's why they try. Like, they're still shooting those shots. And with Chet, man, like, just the rim protection. Like, there was a play in his first summer league game where he came down the weak side, third quarter. I think it was his last block of the game. He blocks a shot, and then on the next play, all he has to do is kind of be near the rim. And it just gets the Jazz to basically just, like, they just turn around. Like, guard's not going to drive into that the second time in a row. And just like the extent to which both those guys can be deterrents by the fact that we know that they can be in two places at once. Like, Wemby takes it to a whole new level. Like, he rotates from areas that, like, I didn't think it was possible to rotate from, like being up at the free throw line and then, like, being able to block a shot to, like, being on the baseline by the paint to blocking a three-pointer. Like, this is basically the things that we have asked big men to do. We have asked it of, like, Rudy Gobert. We have asked it of DeAndre Ayton. And at their best moments, we've asked it of Giannis. And Giannis is probably, like, the one guy, like, okay, yeah, like, he can get there more often than anybody else. But you add a couple extra inches on there and just like Wemby's defensive instincts. And I don't know, I get so excited about seeing where the future of the game is going. And then even just on the offensive end, like I was listening to the JJ Redick podcast, and Wembanyama talks about the guys he's been watching the most in the last 4 years: Giannis, KD, Jokic, and Embiid. Like 4 7-footers that are kind of like building out their own pathway to, be like the future of what bigs can do in this league. Those are the guys that he's watching, and he has little bits of every single one of those guys' games. Like obviously Jokic's playmaking is not something that anybody can replicate, but he's a good playmaker.
Kind of like Steph's shooting. You just have a total
That's a
gift.
once in a lifetime thing.
Yeah.
But like we've seen with the rest of the league, they have adapted some of those principles, right? So Wemby is a guy that can do that. He loves to shoot like he's Kevin Durant. The percentages aren't there yet, but I love the free throw percentage. I love
80+%.
Yeah. He's good for mid range, and he's also just like, I love the touch, and he's just so fluid in his ball handling. That's like that's one underrated aspect of his wingspan too. Like we talk about how good it's going to be on the defensive end, but the fact that he can keep the ball so low to the floor at the same time. So like he has all these elements, right? We don't know what it's going to be. I don't want to put too much on it either, but it's just really exciting to think about.
I think Friday night in Las Vegas, assuming he plays, which all indications are that he will. Mm-hmm. It is going to be a special night in the same way that back in October it was seeing Wemby play against Scoot Henderson. And that arena, Scoot versus Wemby, was pretty empty. There just wasn't a lot of people there. It was, it was a lot of NBA people, but not a lot of fans. Mm-hmm. It just kind of came up. Tickets came out a week prior. But now that you're drafted in the NBA, you've proven it over a full season. You played every game for the Mets 92, and you were an absolute dominant force and led this team with like a $3 million payroll all the way to the finals in France. Now everybody realizes, this is real. This is the real deal after seeing a year of this guy. And now in Summer League playing for the Spurs, opening night against the number 3 pick in the draft. And then if he plays on Sunday against Scoot Henderson with a rematch, I hope he plays both games. It could be a special weekend for the NBA, putting, the future. Victor Wembanyama, he's part of a trend with all these bigs you're talking about with their different styles. But a part of me wonders, is this the beginning of where a bunch of bigs are going to be like this in the new generation? Or is this just a wave we have? Mm-hmm. I just think with the way the game has changed, bigs nowadays are doing all the drills guards have always done. They're shooting the ball, even though they might be, in 5th grade and they're by far the tallest kid in their class. They're not just playing near the basket anymore. Everybody's doing everything on the court. That is what basketball has become. And I think that's what we just see today with the players that we have. And this is where the game is going.
Yeah, it's amazing to see. I feel like the two things, the biggest thing is just going to be injury, right?
That's the big one.
We've seen it with a lot of big players. Like we saw it with Kristaps Porzingis. We saw it with Anthony Davis. Like these guys that do have the mobility and the height at the same time, they do have a harder time staying healthy. Obviously, Chet has missed some time. Wemby has his own injury.
In NBA history, it's littered with guys who are like over 7'3". The Yao Ming, I mean, like it's Sabonis, a ton of guys that are just super, super tall have had injuries in their careers. Manute Bol in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean that's why we're all watching like these videos of what Wembanyama does with his feet, right? Like that's where we're at. Like we want feet pics of Victor Wembanyama basically at this point. Yeah.
I mean, he does it every pregame courtside. He's like goes on through his whole routine. Like they definitely, that's the one reason I feel optimistic. He's, a teenager and they're making this unbelievable investment into his body. Mm-hmm. And this past year, aside from one game early in the year when he missed a little bit of time, he's played every night.
Yeah.
And he's a physical player. He's a tough player. And, you mentioned that interview with JJ. He's a determined player with the right mindset. And if you're betting on character and personality, he has a vision for what his future is going to look like. And I'm very excited. Summer League will be there this weekend with Beyond the Arc. You'll be there with the Ringer. I'm super, super excited to be talking to you, talking to players, talking to other Ringer people. Vegas is going to be great, Seerat. Thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, it could be the biggest weekend in Summer League history. Very excited.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on.